The canyon was a graveyard of echoes. Gunfire swallowed by cliffs, screams devoured by dust. Men crouched behind jagged rocks, their rifles trembling not from fear, but from exhaustion. The sun above burned white, turning the valley floor into molten glass. For 72 hours, the SEAL had been pinned down. Ammunition was running dry, communications were dead, and hope, the kind that kept men moving when logic said stop, had begun to fade. The enemy had the high ground. Mortar shells fell with mechanical rhythm, one every few minutes, closing in inch by inch. There was nowhere left to run. One medic whispered a prayer he'd long forgotten. The team leader, face streaked with dirt and sweat, muttered to no one, "No birds coming. Not here." And still they held, because that's what SEAL do when death circles above. Then came the sound they couldn't mistake. Low, guttural, growing from a distant hum into a living roar, like a storm gathering rage, heads turned toward the canyon's mouth. Someone said her name like a rumor they'd buried long ago. Captain Sarah Connelly, A-10 Warthog pilot. Call sign Havoc. The woman who never backed off a run, no matter how tight the terrain, no matter how suicidal the odds. But she wasn't supposed to be here. Her orders had been revoked. Command had grounded her. Yet she came. The SEAL couldn't see her yet, but they could feel her. The pressure in the air shifting, the faint tremor beneath their boots as her engines tore through the wind. The canyon was too narrow for flight. Every radar system, every manual, every line of logic said it was impossible. But Sarah wasn't built for logic. She was built for defiance. Up in the cockpit, sweat trickled down the back of her neck, pooling under her collar. Her breathing was shallow but steady. The control stick was trembling in her grip, not from turbulence, but from memory. She could still see her brother's face in the flames of another desert. 2 years ago, same call for air support, same desperate voices, but she'd arrived 4 minutes too late. By the time she got there, his unit was gone. Since then, she'd made herself a promise. If she ever heard men begging for air in the dark again, she would come, orders or not. Below, the canyon walls narrowed to a slit, jagged rock slicing the air into whirlwinds. Her HUD screamed warnings: terrain collision, elevation danger, pull up. She silenced them all. The sky tilted as she dropped lower, almost scraping the stone. She whispered into the oxygen mask, not for anyone to hear, not today. The SEAL heard the engines before they saw the plane. It wasn't flying overhead. It was coming through the canyon itself, beneath the ridges, inside the storm. The Warthog appeared like a phantom, wings slicing between cliffs, the sunlight glinting off her gray hull. Her guns opened fire. The sound didn't just fill the valley. It consumed it. Fun. The air shimmered with heat, metal, and vengeance. Every enemy position that had haunted the SEAL for days erupted into dust and fire. Through the chaos, the A-10 danced like something alive. Diving, banking, almost grazing the rock walls. It wasn't precision anymore. It was instinct, memory muscle. Each burst was deliberate, each movement a heartbeat of rage and redemption. When her last rounds left the chamber, the canyon went silent again. Smoke drifted upward. The SEAL stared at the ridgelines, disbelieving. The enemy had vanished. Not retreated, annihilated. A corporal looked skyward just in time to see the A-10 pull up, climbing toward the sun. But then the engines sputtered. One wing had caught shrapnel. The aircraft was bleeding fuel. Up there, Sarah's hands fought the controls, her body thrown forward with every jolt. Warning lights flashed crimson across the cockpit. Eject. That was the protocol. Save yourself. But ejecting meant losing control of the plane, and losing control meant crashing into the very men she'd just saved. Her jaw clenched. She kept her hands where they were. The aircraft groaned under her command. Down below, the SEAL realized what she was doing. The lieutenant shouted at the sky, voice cracking, ordering her to bail out, but she didn't. Instead, she used what little thrust was left to steer the dying Warthog away from them, up toward the far ridge. The explosion, when it came, was almost gentle. A flash of light, a burst of dust, then silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. The wind carried only the faint smell of burnt metal and desert rain. Then one of the SEAL, the youngest, barely 20, picked up the dog tag that had fallen beside him during the firefight. It wasn't hers, but it carried her call sign, etched into the edge. Havoc. By the time rescue helicopters arrived hours later, they found the seal alive, bloodied, but unbroken. And on the far ridge, half buried in sand, they found the wreckage of her A-10. The paint scorched, the wings shattered, but the cockpit empty. There was no body. Just a single flight glove caught on the control stick. Some said she never ejected. Some said she crawled out and disappeared into the desert, same way she came. Silent, unrecorded, unthanked. Weeks later, at the base a ceremony was held. They called it informal. No medals, no speeches, no media, just rows of men standing at attention, hats pressed against hearts. The hangar smelled of jet fuel and silence. Her commanding officer, the same one who grounded her, couldn't look anyone in the eye. He stood there, lips trembling, hands shaking as he read the citation. When he reached her name, his voice broke. In the back row, the SEAL she saved stood shoulder to shoulder. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. Their silence said what words couldn't. That courage sometimes wears no uniform, and that orders mean nothing when lives hang by a thread. One of them slipped a folded note into the pocket of her flight jacket, which hung beside her empty chair. It read, in uneven handwriting, "You didn't just save us, you reminded us why we fight." That night, long after the ceremony ended, a mechanic working the late shift swore he heard the low hum of engines far out in the desert. Too faint to be real, too steady to be imagination. He stepped outside, looked toward the horizon, and thought he saw a flash of silver against the stars. Months passed. The canyon became quiet again, its secrets buried beneath the sand. But soldiers still talked about it in whispers, the day the sky itself descended into the valley of death. For the families of the SEAL, her name became a quiet legend. For the brass, an uncomfortable reminder. For those who were there, it was something sacred. The moment despair turned into defiance. And somewhere, perhaps beyond radar and reason, a lone A-10 might still roam the desert skies, unseen but not forgotten, its pilot keeping her eternal promise that no one is ever truly abandoned in the canyon of death. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do isn't to follow orders, it's to break them. Sometimes, the loudest cry for life comes from silence. And sometimes, the sky remembers what men forget, that heroes don't always return, but their courage never leaves. The story ends there, not with applause, but with reflection. The viewer can feel it, the sting of sacrifice, the ache of what it means to be human, and the quiet realization that courage isn't noise or medals or headlines. It's a choice, made alone, in the space between fear and faith. The kind of choice Captain Sarah Connelly made when even the SEAL had lost hope, and her A-10 dove into the canyon of death.